I mean, can you hear me?
Yes, sir, Mr. Khalifa. Thank you.
I my computer's saying that it's not detecting the speaker, and I don't know how to get the speaker on. Can
That's
I
fine.
do the video with the computer and the sound with the phone?
As long as it works, we don't get any feedback. If not, then we might have to just go through the phone. But if it works, the video with the speaker side, the audio
It's,
from your phone, it shouldn't be an issue.
it sounds fine right now.
Perfect.
Let me check the video again. Yeah, the video's working on the PC, and you can hear me, correct?
You sound fine. Yes, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Lucio, good afternoon, sir. Can you hear us okay?
I can. Good afternoon.
Good to see you, sir.
Likewise.
Ms. Salinas, good afternoon, ma'am. Welcome.
Thank you.
I think Chairman Garza is having some minor technical difficulties. Should be logging on here soon. Ms. Ramos, good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, I can hear you, sir. How are you
Perfect.
doing?
Doing well, doing well. Good afternoon, Commissioner. Thank you for joining us.
Of course, thank you.
You need me still?
No.
Okay.
I'm on.
Chairman, can you hear us okay?
Yes, sir. No, we were just having a little bit of difficulty joining on. They updated our computers and they don't tell us what the new password is.
No worries, sir. We're good.
Okay. So are we ready to call the meeting to order and do a roll call?
I'm confirming, sir, that we've got enough to get started.
Okay. Renee. Ernie?
Mr. Escobar, are you on, Mr. Escobar?
I'm present.
Thank you, sir.
We just text Ernie.
Ernie, I got a message from Ernie, Troy, and Mr. Kent. They won't be able to attend today's meeting.
Okay.
Do I have Mr. Rene Estrada on the line?
Yes, I'm getting connected. Hi, how are you?
Okay, thank you, Mr.
Afternoon.
Estrada.
Yeah.
Chairman, I think we're ready to start and run roll call, sir.
Okay, go right ahead with the roll
Perfect.
call. We'll call the meeting to order and thank everyone for making it this afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Chairman David Garza,
Present.
Vice Chair Commissioner David Fuentes.
Present. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you. Mr. Daniel Lucio.
Present.
Thank you, Mr. Lucio. Mr. Hudson Deoy. Mr. Hudson Deoy. Mr. Joey Trevino. Mr. Joey Trevino, Mr. Rene Estrada.
Present.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Joe Khalifa. I know Joe's on. We were working through. There he is. Thank you, Joe. Mr. Jose Caso. Mr. Jose Caso or Miss Laura Haley? Miss Laura Haley. Mr. Ernesto Garcia did send an email. He won't be available today. Mr. Troy Allen will not be available today. Commissioner Olga Ramos.
I'm here.
Thank you, Commissioner, for joining. Mr. Ben Escobar.
Present.
Thank you, sir. And Miss Annabelle Salinas.
Here.
And Mr. Michael Kent also sent an email. He'll be out today. Chairman, we have quorum. I'm going to take a quick roll call on our non-voting members. Mr. Willie Cupid.
Good afternoon.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Adrian Perez. Mr. David Ramirez. Mr. Manny Cruz. We do have Mr. Nick Collins from the Texas Water Development Board. Thank you, sir, for joining. Mr. Elijah Casas.
I'm here.
Thank you. Ms. Michelle Garcia. Mr. Nick Gallegos. Mr. Ramon Macias. I know Ms. Shonda Mace had someone in her replacement today.
Skylar Levere here for Shonda Mace.
Thank you, Skylar. Good afternoon,
Sir.
sir. And Ms. Kara Smith. Chairman, we have quorum and are ready for our meeting, sir.
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
First item on our agenda is, of course, well, first of all, do you have any written public comments that you've received that we need to include in this meeting?
None through phone call and none through our website, Chairman.
Thank you, sir. Item number 4 is approval of minutes from the previous meeting of December the 10th. Everybody got a copy of those yesterday or whatever day we sent out the agenda. Is there any corrections, additions, or deletions to those minutes that need to be considered at this time? I hear no comments. Is there a motion to approve or disapprove of this minutes?
So moved.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Ramos.
Second.
Second by Ms. Salinas. All those in favor, either raise your right hand or say aye.
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 Motion carries. Item number 5 is discussion and update from the Texas Water Development Board, and I believe Skylar is on. We'll let you take over, Skylar.
That would come from Mr. Nick Collins, Chairman.
Or Mr. Collins, I'm sorry.
All good, Chair. I do have quite a few things to get through, so apologies for that. So the technical memorandum was due to the board on January 7th, 2026. TWB administrative completeness reviews are ongoing with a 30-day review period. TWB staff will notify regions with a notice to proceed to task 5A or request for information if the tech memo is found to be administrative incomplete. Following the administrative completeness review, TWB staff will provide informal comments. There's a reminder, work performed under task 4C, performance of flood management evaluations is not contingent on approval of the technical memorandum. The goal of task 4C is for RFPGs to perform a subset of the potential FMEs identified in task 4A, and in doing so, identify and evaluate additional FMPs or FMSs that could be recommended under task 5A. RFPGs have flexibility in determining which identified FMEs should be performed under task 4C and should approve the list at a regular RFPG meeting. A chair-led conference call was held on December 3rd to discuss regional approaches to task 5B. The video and presentation slides have been posted to the website, and as always, if anybody in the call would like to have that, please let me know and I can put that in the chat. Moving on, an ordered list of FMEs for the TWB to perform under task 5B is due on March 26, 2026. Prior to submission, RFPG should approved the list of FMEs as well as the metrics used to determine small and rural communities with limited resources for the FMEs that will be performed by TWB. A reminder email was sent on January 20th to provide details on RFPG requirements for this task. And just a reminder, when we're talking about metrics, that is the definitions that we had discussed previously. So if you see a TWB email discussing metrics for task 5B, that is the definitions that y'all will be discussing later today. And then finally, the TWB contracted with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service to create a model for calculating economic losses due to flooding events on agricultural lands. This project is now complete, and the agricultural flood loss guidance document and analysis tool have been published onto the TWB website. So if either one of those, the chair-led conference call or the AgriLife or the agricultural flood loss guidance document analysis tool, if either one of those y'all would like, I could put that into the chat as well. So just let me know. And that's the end of my updates.
Any questions for Nick? And I'm sorry, we had been on another call and we were talking about Skylar. Skylar, I didn't mean to put you on the spot.
No problem, sir. No worries.
I know that's GLO. Okay. So any comments or questions of Nick? Okay, if we appreciate the comments. The only thing I would have is, when are the requests due for the small communities that are being worked on for projects? Nick, do you have a deadline for that group or not?
Yes, sir. Are you talking about the community affirmation forms, sir?
Right, yes.
So those are due. So the first two are due, I believe, March 26th. And then the rest of them, all the other ones are due in April. And I believe Anne will be going over that later. But I can get you the specific date in April if you would like, sir. The 24th. April 24th.
Okay,
Yes.
okay. I'm sorry, I'm getting ahead a little bit, so.
No, you're good, sir.
Yeah, appreciate that, okay? Any other questions of Nick? Thank you, sir. Appreciate your update. Item number 6 is approval and certification of administrative expenses incurred by the planning group sponsor for the development and continued work of the regional flood plan. Jaime?
None at this time, Chairman. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Item number 7 is discussion and update from technical consultants. And I think that you're up.
Yes, sir. Let me,
You gonna share something with us?
I am, let me get that up right now.
What?
All right, can you all see the title slide on the presentation right now?
Yes.
Great.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you for confirming. All right. Well, good afternoon, everyone. It's nice seeing you all again after the holidays. We had our last meeting mid-December. And so I'm going to give a presentation that covers items 7 and 8 on the agenda. So I'll start with a kind of a brief update on all the progress that's been made since that December meeting. And then we'll get into what we need to discuss and hopefully have a discussion and possible action on in item 8. And so some of this stuff Nick kind of has touched on, and I'll just kind of reiterate a couple things and then go into a little more detail on the specific items we need to discuss. So we'll talk briefly about the technical memorandum. Nick already mentioned that it was submitted on time and it's under review. I'm going to give a quick update on task 3B, which was an analysis of the gaps, where we have gaps in region 15 in our flood risk information and what areas of greatest flood risk we have in our region. And I think it's good to take a quick look at that and review it, just to provide some context as we start talking about performance of FMEs in tasks 4C and 5B. And then we'll wrap up with just kind of a look ahead on the things that we have, kind of next steps moving forward in the next couple of months and some of the things we need to achieve at some of our next few meetings. So during our last meeting in December, we presented briefly an overview of the technical memorandum, got your approval to submit it. Nick already said this, we did get our submittal in on time, and we're just waiting to get any comments or an acceptance of that deliverable. So we should be expecting that in the near future, based on that 30-day timeline review period that Nick mentioned. And then one of our next major deliverables, or our next major deliverable to Texas Water Development Board, is to provide that list of FMEs, flood management evaluations, that the Regional Flood Planning Group is going to recommend be performed by Texas Water Development Board. And that will include a budget and a scope of work for the first two prioritized FMEs. And those will be performed throughout this year, starting later in the spring, and have to be wrapped up in early 2027. The intent is that those FMEs should result in the development of FMPs that will be included in the 2028 regional flood plan. So anything that is recommended, it needs to be feasible to perform within that time period. And then the expanded list of FMEs will be performed over the next 5 years, and we'll talk a bit more about that. Following that submittal that's due on March 26th, that list of FMEs, and then the scopes and fees for the first two priorities, on April 26th, then we have to follow up with the more detailed scope information on the other FMEs that are on that list for Texas Water Development Board. So before we get into any more detail on FME performance lists, I wanted to review some of the work completed on Task 3B, just to provide some of that context of where we have data gaps and where we have our greatest flood risk. So the map on the screen is showing the greatest current gaps and where we have available flood risk data throughout our Region 15. So the red polygons signify those areas with the greatest level of gaps with respect to available flood risk data, and then the green areas have less gaps, and those are areas that we have more detailed studies available. So in general, our region's greatest gaps tend to be in the more rural portions of the planning area, where we are limited to predominantly BLE data sets. And then our more densely populated areas, which tend to fall in the southern part of the region, has relatively fewer data gaps as we have more detailed studies in those regions. So this map shows the region's areas of greatest flood risk. You'll notice it's nearly an inverse of the previous map. And so that explains why we have these large gaps in the upper portions of the planning area, and why previous efforts have largely focused on developing data in those more densely populated regions in the southern portion of Region 15. This, however, does not mean that the green areas are absent of flood risk. And this is one of the things that Texas Water Development Board is attempting to address in Task 5B, which involves the Regional Flood Planning Group providing a list of small and rural communities with FMEs that can be performed by Texas Water Development Board and their consultants, with the aim of developing FMPs for inclusion in the 2028 plan, and then beyond that in future amendments and future versions of the plan. So with that context on flood risk data gaps and the areas of greatest flood risk, let's move on and discuss tasks 4C and 5B specifically, both of which involve the performance of some of our region's FMEs. So starting with task 4C, it covers those FMEs that will be performed by the Regional Flood Planning Group. As your technical consultant, TAF has a budget of just under $776,000 to perform any recommended FMEs for our region that you all see fit. The intent is to work on FMEs that will identify FMPs or FMSs that can be incorporated into the 2028 Regional Flood Plan. And so to achieve this end, the RFPG selected FMEs that we're going to perform have to be feasible to complete by early spring of 2027. Task 5B also involves FMEs, but the intent here is to provide a list that Texas Water Development Board
And is that like doable, with that timeline?
Yeah, and we're going to talk about some of the challenges we've identified with some of our preliminary rankings that I'm going to show in a couple slides and some ways that we can make them feasible. We have a lot of studies that are kind of county-wide flood risk data, and we have some suggestions about how to kind of fine-tune those a bit to be able to do it within the time period.
Okay, thank you.
Sure, no problem. So task 5B, so this is the FMEs that will be performed by Texas Water Development Board. Each region across the state has a budget of 3.9 million that's been dedicated to perform FMEs over the next 5 years. But the intent here is to focus on rural or small communities that don't have the resources to perform the FMEs on their own. And so one of the things that we need to do today is agree on what metrics should be used to define rural and underserved communities. And we have one possible suggestion for this, and I'll show that on the next slide. And we can talk about that a bit more. And then that's what we are requesting action on in item 8 on the agenda later on. Beyond the list of FMEs for Texas Water Development Board that's due on the 26th of this year, I already mentioned this, but we have to provide a scope and fee for those top 2, and then that community affirmation form will need to be signed by the entities that signify they do want Texas Water Development Board to proceed with the project, and they're on board with the intent of the study. After that submittal in March, then we will work on getting the information for the rest of the FMEs on the list, including the detailed scope and fee, and then making sure we have all the other community affirmation forms that we need for the rest of the list. So the first thing we need to agree on is how we should define what areas qualify as a rural or small community that lacks resources to perform the FMEs on their own. And so our recommendation would be to use the rural definition provided in the Texas Water Development Board 2024 intended use plan. And this is what several of the other regions that we've kind of been coordinating with, it sounds like they're going in this direction or some version of it. The intended use plan classifies a municipality as being rural if it has a population of 10,000 people or less, or if it's located in a county where no urban area has a population of more than 50,000. For counties, the rural definition would apply to a county where no urban area has a population of more than 50,000. So since this definition mentions urban areas without defining what constitutes an urban area, we're assuming an urban area as those incorporated areas that were previously defined in our task 1. Based on that criteria, we have what that breakdown looks like on the map on the right for region 15. And so the counties that are colored orange would be considered rural using that IUP criteria, and then the blue counties would be urban or not rural. And so this would equate to 11 out of our 15 counties being classified as rural. On the municipal level, we have a similar color coding in the map. With the scale of it, it might be hard to distinguish, but it results in 38 of our 54 municipal areas being designated as rural. And then for other region districts, things like drainage districts, irrigation districts, 19 of 28 of those would be designated rural if we used this Texas Water Development Board 2024 intended use plan definition.
Did that definition come from you all, or was it a recommendation from the Water Development Board?
It is the definition that's in the intended use plan from the Texas Water Development Board's FIF 2024 IUP. So that's how it's stated in that IUP.
Okay.
We just took it directly from that. They have not necessarily recommended that it be used for this specific purpose, and we are supposed to get direction from the regional flood planning group on how that should be defined. So we can use this, we could go a different direction, we can have a discussion on what makes sense for our region. But this is kind of what we used as a starting point.
I would like to see if there's any comments in regards to what you just shared with us and from the rest of the folks on the call.
Absolutely.
And if I don't hear of anybody else coming on, I will assume that we'll proceed with the discussion with this stated as is.
Yeah, quick question. This is Renestra. As far as the population sizes, like the small communities, like for example in Combs, we are smaller than that number, but yet we are immediately adjacent to the Harlingen, Santa Rosa area, Rio Hondo to the other side, where we're abutting to a bigger community. Is there a need for a distinction where we stand alone as a city?
Yeah, so if the city of Combs, as an example, had an FME that they were the local sponsor, right? That's you would be evaluated based on that municipal entity's rural designation on whether or not it would be considered for the FME list that Texas Water Development Board would perform. So it kind of comes back, I guess, who the sponsor is. If you're being incorporated into a larger study where, say, the city of Harlingen was the sponsor, right? Then they wouldn't meet that rural designation. So potentially you could be ranked high on a list to be performed by the regional flood planning group, but if you don't have the rural designation, at least based on the way that it's in the intended use plan, then you wouldn't meet that rural designation and wouldn't be eligible for that list. But again, that's up to the discretion of the regional flood planning group.
So if we joined with other smaller communities, as long as we don't go over the number, or if there's three entities that are smaller communities working together, do they add up all the citizenship of the the census numbers, and we risk losing the category or categorization?
So I don't think we actually have any like that right now, so it hasn't come up. But the way that I understand it, and Nick, if you want to jump in and have a different understanding, my understanding is the basis would be on whoever the local sponsor is. So you might have a project where you have multiple small entities, but you only have one designated local sponsor. So to me, the rule designation would be based on whoever that local sponsor is. But Nick, does that seem correct to you?
Yeah, that sounds right. And I don't know if we actually discussed internally if we would be, I guess, combining entities, like if combining entities would make that. However, I know we've discussed and previously that the FMEs that were being proposed or submitted have to already be approved by the RFPG. So any FMEs that are being considered or being thought of need to have been previously already approved. And then that's what y'all are looking at right now, which I'm sure Ann will probably have a list later on of the FMEs that would be viable with this definition. But yeah, it would have to already have been put into the regional flood plan, or at least approved by the RFPG.
Okay. The only reason I ask is because the floodwaters don't delineate by cities. So they combine us. The floodwaters combine us. So, hey, okay. Thank you.
If there's no other questions, Ann, go ahead and proceed to your next slide.
Okay, sure. So I'll go ahead and go through the rest of what our initial rankings looked like, how we evaluated them, some of the challenges we have, and then maybe some folks will have some other thoughts or questions about this, and then we'll come back and discuss that item again separately as part of agenda item 8. So the slide here is showing the process we're utilizing as we assess our FMEs and start trying to rank them. And we do have a preliminary ranking that will show you. We currently have around 500 FMEs, some of which were recommended and included during cycle 1 or the early 2025 amendment process that we went through in early 25. And then we have others that were identified as potential FMEs during the second planning cycle. Those haven't been formally recommended yet. And so if some of those kind of rise to the top, we'd have to have them recommended by the regional flood planning group prior to incorporating them into the list. But if we haven't already received those FMEs, that cutoff to consider potential ones right now is already passed before the technical memorandum was submitted. So regardless, though, of whether they've been formally recommended or not, we proceeded in ranking all potential FMEs based on the 7 criteria that we have listed on the slide. It includes affected structures, affected population, critical facilities that are impacted by flooding within the FME area, low water crossings, road closures, flooded road segments, and then impacted agricultural lands. And so from there, we applied the rural criteria that we presented on the last slide, assuming that we would use that IUP definition, although we don't have to. Based on your input, we can change that and apply something else. But based on that ranking, we divided into 2 lists. So we had a list of rural and non-rural FMEs. The rural FMEs are under consideration for inclusion in the list that gets submitted to Texas Water Development Board. And then the other FMEs are on a list for the RFPG to potentially perform. I'll say that right now we have them split that way. It doesn't necessarily mean that the regional flood planning group can't decide that their technical consultant also perform rural FMEs that maybe didn't make it to the Texas Water Development Board list. That's something that can be discussed, but right now this is how we kind of separated them. And this is where we are right now. So from here, and I'm going to show you the initial rankings and talk about some challenges on the next couple slides. But there's some additional work that we need to do to filter the project list to confirm scope and budget for each FME. And then another item that we had originally discussed, and we'll talk a little more later, there's some regions that are limiting how many FMEs are performed for each sponsor. I think for our Texas Water Development Board list, that might not even be an issue because we have a lot of different entities. For our non-rural list that there's one entity that has a lot that ranked high, although I think when we address some of the other issues, that's going to become a non-issue. And then, so as we're going through these, we're going to confirm scope, budget, interest. I know we had several FMEs that were included because entities were interested in having them as FMPs, but they were still in the process of doing their own studies to elevate them. So obviously those don't make sense to include in this list if they're already being performed. So basically we need to go back and look at our preliminary rankings, coordinate with those local project sponsors to see what still makes sense, confirm scopes, budgets, areas, and then ultimately we'd have a preliminary list to bring back to you sometime before that March deadline, and I'll propose a time for that later. So this list is showing our very preliminary ranking of FMEs. Again, assuming that we used that rural designation from the FIF intended use plan criteria. And then based on that $3.9 million per region budget that Texas Water Development Board had shared with us, this is kind of how the list falls right now based on the information we have. There's a couple FMEs on this list that we do believe may no longer be relevant. There has been some ongoing studies in Star and Valverde counties, and so we need to follow up with those sponsors to see if the study that they intended in these FMEs still makes sense. These were submitted during the first cycle, so some of them may be done in progress or need to be scaled down. There's also another challenge we have here, and Commissioner, you mentioned this in terms of feasibility with the timeline. There's a lot of FMEs that are to develop flood risk maps on a county-wide basis, and that could be challenging not only because of the time constraints associated with when these need to be moved forward to include in the 2028 plan, developing flood risk data on a countywide basis also doesn't necessarily involve developing FMPs, which is really the goal of this task. So we're going to present a potential solution to that specific problem on the next slide, and I can get your feedback there. But before we get there, I want to bring up a couple other issues that we've identified that we would need to address prior to finalizing ranking a kind of a final FME list. The first one being that the FME boundaries associated with the studies. And again, this is particularly the case for those that were submitted during the first planning cycle, may not always be appropriate. And so, for example, we've observed boundaries that use an entire county or drainage district boundary for a project that represents only a much smaller subset of that area. And so this is important because all the exposure metrics that guide the ranking system are all based on the defined FME boundaries. So it has the potential to overestimate the impact that an FME would have and could elevate that ranking relative to another project that uses a smaller and more realistic FME boundary. And so we did a lot of work during the second cycle to address that. And I think we have pretty good FME boundaries that we've been able to work with sponsors to get this cycle. But I think there's still several FME boundaries from the first cycle that need some fine tuning, and that will affect some of these rankings. Next, the FME budget that was included on some of the projects doesn't always make sense. In some cases, we believe that there were costs that were representative of some rough estimated construction cost as opposed to the cost of performing the actual FME. And then in other cases, it's just the costs that we got, several years ago, 5+ years ago, were pretty dated and probably need a little updating. And then, as I mentioned before, too, the last thing was just identifying those projects that are already in progress or already under contract with another that somebody else is already working on, and making sure that they were eliminating those from consideration to be performed by Texas Water Development Board. Just pausing to make sure there's no questions. So regarding the issue that I brought up on the previous slide for the FMEs that are to develop countywide flood risk maps, what we'd like to do is reach out to those that are kind of preliminarily ranking high on our list, reach out to those local sponsors to first confirm the interest in the FME and the status of any other ongoing projects, whether or not they're still relevant or whether they're already being performed. And then assuming that those boxes are checked, we propose working with them to revise the scope and budget of the FME to fit the budget and timeline and the intent of Task 5B to make sure that it results in feasible FMPs that we can recommend in 2028 plan. And so our general recommendation would be to leverage available BLE models, which should be available for the entire planning region, and then use those to identify 5 or 6 problem areas within those counties, and then refine the models specifically for those specific areas using limited survey data. We would only look at design frequency events and then develop 1 to 2 potential FMPs for each of those problem areas. The study wouldn't include collection of extensive survey data across the entire countywide area. It would limit simulation of historical events and wouldn't include CIP development or drainage criteria revision. And so this is what we were considering to try to bring some of those larger projects that might not be feasible in the timeline or that or budget, to make sure that they could be done in the time provided and that they would result in the generation of FMPs for inclusion in the 2028 plan. I'll add too that I know several other regions are also considering this type of an approach. So how do we move forward from here to meet that March 26th submittal deadline? So I mentioned we have work to do to reach out to all those entities, but the first step is to agree on that rule definition of how we're evaluating FMEs and the rankings and what criteria we want to use to consider what entities will be designated as rural. And then it's a matter of, as I described, reaching out to the sponsors on the scope and the budget and the interest. And then eventually, we would have a draft finalized list that we would need to bring back to you sometime in probably earlier March. Because the list would have to be reviewed and approved by the regional flood planning group prior to submittal, including the 2 projects that we're going to prioritize for performance in the 2026 through early 2027. So moving on to task 4C, and this is similar in that it involves performance of FMEs, but this is FMEs that will be performed by the regional flood planning group and us as your technical consultant. And this is our preliminary list. Again, using the same criteria that I presented on that flow chart slide a little earlier. All the challenges that I mentioned for task 5B related to unrealistic FME boundaries, costs, and ongoing work also apply here. So again, we'll have to coordinate with the local sponsors on some of these to see what makes sense and how they can fit in the timeline. As an example, you'll notice there are 7 FMEs on this list that are tied for the 2nd place. So we have a red line drawn after that Progresso project, but it's not necessarily that Progresso project ranked number 2. We have all of these other projects that tied for 2nd place, but we have a limited budget to perform them. And so I think this issue here specifically is largely related to the FME boundary, where it was using the entire district boundary. And so I think as we work with the various entities, this isn't the only example. These were just the ones that kind of raised the top of the rating, and define that FME impact area a bit better. This problem would be resolved, and there'd be a little more diversity in terms of sponsoring entities with FMEs that ranked near the top. So just to summarize, and the look ahead on the things we need to do, and I think I've said this a few times, but I'll just very quickly say there's still a lot of work to do to coordinate with the local sponsors to finalize the rankings and clean up some of those problems that I identified with respect to impact areas and scope and timelines. We need to finalize that draft list, and we will need to have another RFPG meeting in March prior to the submittal deadline, so we can bring that back to you based on any guidance you give us for this process right now. And then we'll be working, once we have that list, we'll be finalizing the scope of work and getting all the community affirmation forms that need to be submitted for all of the lists or all the FMEs on the Texas Water Development Board list prior to the April 24th deadline. The other thing that you can expect in the next couple months, we're working on finalizing draft chapter write-ups for tasks 1 through 3, and we would like to start sending those for your review and consideration at some upcoming meetings so we can get those out of the way in advance of when we're trying to submit the draft plan in 2027 and before we get working on a lot of the other tasks that we'll be covering over the next year or so.
Anne, real quick.
Yes.
I just want to let you know that I had double checked our email. Actually, my manager did while we were working. The community affirmation forms, the first 2 are due. The rest of them are optional for the time being. So
Great.
yes, that is not a issue. If y'all do get them all done, that's great. But if not, that is also fine.
Okay, great. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I had a question on the critical infrastructure. Did you add electrical substations to that list?
Yes, we did.
Okay, where did you acquire the list of all the electrical substations?
Alvaro, are you on this meeting?
Yeah, I want to make sure we capture everything. We have. We've got.
Yeah, okay, you are here. Great. So, Alvaro, can you help me with that? I know that you had some data sets, and then there was it was a matter of investigating, it went through a lot of like aerial imagery and stuff like that too. DIST. Do you have a
Mhm.
source off the top of your head that was used for those electrical substations?
I don't have a source off the top of my head, but a lot of it was through aerial imagery, and we did have the electrical lines. So you could find like a common point within the electrical lines, and you find a substation, then we would confirm with aerial imagery.
Okay,
I would need to check in with Miranda, but there might be a list online too that she used. I remember she had various sources compiled together, so it wasn't just one source, but from multiple sources.
Yeah, I know we had to generate a lot of that data because it wasn't readily available, but like Alvaro said, we had lines and then had to find kind of where they met from recent imagery.
okay. I mean, I'd like to take that list, at least for AEP Texas, just to make sure everything's on the list. We, you know, we distribution substations with transmission, and we have switching stations. So I want to make sure that we capture everything.
Yeah, we can, I could get that information to you and we can let you review it and get any comments you have.
That'd be great. Thanks.
Anybody else have any questions, comments, things we need to discuss? Our next agenda item is we are requesting your, possible action on the metrics we use to define those rural communities. We presented one option using the 2024 FIF intended use plan definition. But if there's some, if anybody wants to discuss another method or other criteria that we should be considering, that's what we'd like to get from this item right now.
Daniel, on the question you had on the substations and the other assets that you have, do you all have a list of those available that you could provide Halfin Associates to make sure that they can have included everything?
Yes, sir, we do.
Would it be possible for you to send it to Ann Whitco, and maybe that way it would make sure that we're as inclusive as possible?
Will do, sir.
Okay, thank you so much. Thank you so much.
That'd be great. Thank you.
Okay. Any other comments on the presentation from Ann in regards to what, I know it's a lot to consider and think about because it's quite a bit of information. It's quite a bit of, it's just a lot of things that will determine how and where we go into the future with that particular aspect of what we're doing. So it might not be, maybe we can allow everyone to, if they have any suggestions or comments, it's hard to think of them right on the spot, but if anyone does, we can always email you any concerns or comments that we might have for your consideration.
Sure. Yeah, that's fine. My only concern is that we need to proceed with developing a draft list based on the ranking, which would require us to know how we should define those rural areas. I think we could, if there's no other comments right now, we can proceed on the route that we're on and try to do, can we do both?
Well, I just don't want to end up where somebody's comment, I mean, if we could at least have a couple of days, maybe like till the end of the week. If anyone has a concern, please submit it to you for consideration and how it would impact what you're doing. If not, proceed as we've discussed, moving on.
Okay.
Because it's a short timeline for you all too, I know.
It is. Nick, did you have a comment on that?
Yeah, I was gonna say Region 14 also had this same exact issue where they all got this stuff at the same time. They all wanted comments. So instead of, and with them, they decided to wait a whole another month to discuss this. So if this is up for discussion, y'all could tentatively approve the definition pending comments are addressed. So if that's the motion that was offered, then that would be applicable and perfectly fine.
Great, thank you for that.
Which leads us to exactly where we're at, is item number 8. you know, is someone wanting to, which is discussion and possible action on the matrix used to define small and rural communities with limited resources for inclusion in the FME list to be submitted to the Texas Water Development Board. Is there someone that is willing to give us a motion on that now for consideration?
That'll be my motion. So that for the purpose of moving forward, pending comments in the next few days.
Okay. Is there a second to that motion?
I second.
Thank you, Ms. Salinas. Is there any discussion other than what we've already had in regards to the motion?
Chairman, if I may, if you do approve as such, it would just maybe define the date that the comments, an actual due date for the comments, Chairman.
5 o'clock on Friday.
Sounds good, Chairman.
Is that okay, Annabelle?
Yeah,
And is that
that
okay,
sounds good.
Commissioner Ramos? Okay,
Correct.
okay. So with those, Nick, are we okay?
Yes, sir. Yes, you are okay.
Thank you. Okay, if that's the case, all of those in favor say aye or raise your right hand.
Aye.
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 All those opposed, same sign. Motion carries. Proceed as discussed, and just if you do get some comments that are of relevance to the board, make sure share them with all of us through Jaime, okay?
Will do, sir. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Item number 9 was an item that we wanted to put on there just to make sure we will be disseminating the committee member attendance sheet to everyone so that people can see, our attendance records and make sure that we're aware. We really appreciate everyone that's on these calls because it takes time and effort to get on there. And sometimes we don't think we're doing much, but at the end of the day, when the 2 recommendations come for those small communities, it's going to mean a lot for them. So, thank you so much for doing that. So Jaime, after the meeting today, could you please share those attendance records to everyone?
True. Yes, sir, Chairman.
Okay. Item number 10, public comments. If anyone has signed up with you, Jaime, or with me, I have none here.
None via phone, none via website, Chairman.
Okay, so, there's no public comment. Item number 11 is consider a date and agenda items for the next meeting. What we will consider now is a date so that we can all put it on our calendar. And there was a suggestion of 3/11, which works out for I think, hopefully most of us. Let's tentatively put 3/11 on our calendars. And unless there's some folks that can tell us now that they cannot be there, we will proceed with such. Okay, Jaime?
Sounds good, Chairman.
Okay, so 3/11, same time. And we will go with that. And with that, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
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 Meeting is adjourned. Happy New Year to everyone, and stay safe.
Everybody.
Thank you all.
Thank
Yes,
you.
Thank you, everyone.